That's worse, Bob.
I just go into the office.
Kelly, go and get me.
Now call this regular workshop meeting of the Jacksonville City Council to order. We have a copy of the proposed agenda for tonight's meeting, and we want to make a few changes in there, so
I'll make a motion that we move the health plan, which is under item 4, B. We're going to move that to the head of the workshop topics, and then I would also ask that we go into a closed session at 6:15 for personnel matters. Travis?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, so we're going to go ahead and, we got the agenda adopted. Now we have some minutes from April 4th, 2017 regular workshop meeting and an April 11th, 2017 special workshop meeting, along with 2 consent items that are on the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and adopt.
Second.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, so we're going to go now to our workshop topics for this evening, and as stated in the motion, we're going to start off with the health plan. Dr. Woodruff, I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. If you have your budget book with you, or if you have your iPad, the health benefits program is on page 181. The reason why we're asking you to deal with the budget focus topic of health plan first is that we are proposing changes to the health plan. If you concur in those plans, we're going to ask you tonight to formally state that, so that we might then work with Blue Cross Blue Shield and have enough time to actually make the amendments and notify the employees before the new fiscal year begins July the 1st. On the health plan, as you know, the city is self-insured. While we say that it's a Blue Cross Blue Shield program, that is because Blue Cross Blue Shield administers it. But we are our own plan. The only people who are in our plan are city employees and their dependents and retirees. Additionally, the city has a health consultant who is out of Wilmington, and he comes up on a regular basis and discusses with us things that he is seeing in the industry, and also discusses his philosophies and his evaluation of how Blue Cross Blue Shield is doing relative to their assignments. The internal team that works with the health plan is the finance group, the HR group, and of course CMO, and that includes the city attorney. When you look at our health plan, we have 946 people in the plan. We are a large plan. And you can see that the majority are city employees, but almost half are dependents. So what you'll have is, for example, in my case, I'm covered as a city employee. My wife is covered as a dependent. We also have 41 people who are retirees. Now, that doesn't mean there are 41 retirees. What that means is that through the retiree program, they or their dependents total 41. And as you recall, the philosophy of the City Council some 5 or 6 years ago was that the retiree premium would not be subsidized. We have taken a series of steps, and today they're not subsidized. They're paying their full rate. But altogether, our plan, 946 persons in the plan. The plan consists of 4 different plans based upon deductibles or the HSA. HSA stands for Health Savings Account. You'll notice that in the $1,250 deductible, we have 107 employees. Now, that may be 107 employees and a number of dependents, but we're just showing you in the employee count. In the $1,750 deductible, we have 102 employees. In the $2,750 deductible, we have 259 employees, and that's not unusual. The largest deductible is where you normally see the largest number of employees. But we have 4 plans. The employee has the ability to select which of those 4 plans they want to participate in. And you can see the numbers that are currently selecting. You will recall approximately 2 budgets ago, we raised the deductibles. There was once a $750 deductible, that was replaced by the 1250 plan. There was a $1,000 deductible, a $1,500 deductible, a $2,000 deductible. But to hold down premium increases over time, we have had to make plan changes, and your plans today have these deductible levels. Revenue is funded by both the city government and the city employees. If you'll notice, generally for simple math, which Gail only lets me do simple math in public, you can say that 3/4 of the money comes from the city government and roughly 25% comes from the employee. But overall, the total revenue this year is $4.31 million. Let's look at expenditures. Medical expenses, prescription, administration, wellness, teledoc, the total expenses, $4.4 million. If you go back, 4.31 and 4.4 means we're running a deficit. The last 3 years, we have covered the deficit by using the health savings account, not the HSA, the fund balance in the health account. Now, how is that fund balance created? When premiums come in, they are what I would call sacred premiums. They go into the health account, and at the end of the year, if the expenses are less than the premiums, then that surplus was put into an account. As you will recall, several years ago, we came to you and said, we need an 8% increase, but rather than pass it on, we will simply tap the reserve. That reserve belonged to the employees and it belonged to the city. Why? Because both the city and the employees contribute to the fund. The last several years, we have held down premiums by using the reserve. Well, there's good news and there's bad news about doing that. The good news is it holds down premium increases. The bad news is eventually the reserve runs dry. And that's where we are this year. We are down now to where the actual reserve has less than $200,000 in it. You can appreciate that in 1 year, we can wipe out that reserve completely. And if we do that, it suddenly means we have to have premium increases in the middle of the year, which none of us like to do. If you look at the overall actions that we have taken to try to hold down the cost of health insurance, we have tried everything from increasing prescription deductibles to trying to incentivize the use of generics, to changing the co-pays, to deductibles. We've tried a lot of things. Very little has worked. There is one program which our consultant, not Blue Cross Blue Shield, but our consultant, what's Hank's last name? E-Step, out of Wilmington, identified and brought to us. And that's what we call the Phonodoc or Teledoc program. Now, how does that work? We pay $5.80 per employee per month. So every employee who is on our health plan, other than those on the HSA, because for some odd reason the federal law doesn't let anyone on the health savings account participate in certain things, but we pay $5.80 per employee per month. So, in my case, $5.80. In Ron's case, $5.80. In John's case, even as an attorney, it's only $5.80. That was supposed to be funny, but that's okay. The interesting thing is, by paying $5.80, it not only covers me, but it covers my wife. Why? Because she's in the plan. But we don't pay $5.80 for Richard and $5.80 for Gwen. It's just $5.80. So if you have an employee who has 3 children and a wife who are on the plan, it's $5.80 total. What's the benefit? The program is set up where 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you pick up the phone and you dial a number. Now, you have to register, and it takes about 10 minutes to go through all the health questions. The person on the other end is actually a medical doctor registered to perform his services in North Carolina, his or her services. And the interesting thing is, you do this all from your desk, or from your house, or from your car. And our experience has been within 5 minutes, you get a call back. Now, I don't mean this as a negative statement. You walk into one of the emergency care centers here, and you're most likely going to see a physician's assistant or maybe a nurse practitioner. You might see a doctor. In this case, every call is returned by a medical doctor. There's nothing wrong with the other people giving you coverage. What's amazing is through January, February, March, we had 83 city employees use the teledoc program. And we estimate that that's over a $60,000 savings. Now, how do we estimate that? We get monthly reports that show what time of the day the person was called, the service was called. It's reasonable to think that if the call went in to them between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., that one of two things would have happened. They would have done nothing, or they would have gone to the emergency room. The emergency room is over $1,200. What we also know is that from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., they probably would have gone to one of the urgent care. And that bill could range from $130 to $180. Most of our calls are for what? Flu, upper respiratory, an earache, a child running a temperature at 2 o'clock in the morning. So what we have found is that while a lot of things are not going right in our health plan, the one thing, knock on wood, that seems to be going right is the teledoc program. We have gone out to almost, not all, but almost every employee group in the city and have promoted this. Now, you have sitting around the room this evening a number of city employees. If you have used the teledoc system, would you raise your hand? Okay. Anybody had a bad experience with that? Okay. These are the type things we're going to have to continue to experiment with, because this isn't going to balance the budget, and it's not realistic to think that January, February, March, you're going to have the same experience all year long. Why? Well, summer comes along and there's not too many people getting the flu. May get a bad sunburn, but, our estimate is that we will save about $100,000 after expenses by using the teledoc program. But what we're showing you they are the type of things that we are trying to do, what I'll call innovatively, to try to hold down the cost of health insurance. Now, we can continue to change the plans, which you're going to see some proposed changes in just a minute. But what we have to do is change the behavior. And I'm not saying the employees are having bad behavior. It's the fact that when you're sick, you do certain things. And if we can get employees to do the teledoc, which obviously we are, you saw the show of hands, this is a step in the right direction. You'll remember in the budget assumptions, we talked about health insurance the first night. And we said there were going to be cost increases and pay changes. Just no two ways around it. We estimated at that time premium increases of 10% plus or minus for the employees and for the city. And we said there would be plan changes. Over the last 30 days, finance and HR and the health consultant and Blue Cross Blue Shield, we have met and looked at the whole plan to try to determine what do we do. There are no silver bullets. I guess I should have said, there is no drug you can take to cure this problem, okay? So the bad news is shown on this page. We are recommending going from 4 plans to 3. Eliminating the $1,250 deductible plan. That will leave the $1,750, the $2,750, and the HSA. Basically, 102 of your employees, or whatever that number was on the former slide, we'll have to make a decision to move to one of the other plans or do something else. We're also going to increase the emergency room copay. That has been increased now 3 different times, and we are not changing the behavior. And while we cannot tell you who goes to the emergency room, we can tell you why they go. The number one reason is children who are sick in the middle of the night. It isn't, appendicitis. It isn't a stroke. It's that type of thing. So we're recommending that the copay go from $200 to $300. That's pretty stiff. But at one point, it was only $50 copay. We've increased it, and we never have changed the behavior. So hopefully, by getting up to a number as high as $300, we can change that. It's projected that copay change will save us about $35,000. It's not going to save us $100,000. It's going to save us about $35,000. The next thing, which is unfortunate, we are looking at an employer contribution increase of 10%, a premium increase for the employees of 10%, continue with the HSA. The first year we offered it, I believe there were 6 people who were in the HSA. Today there are 44. And that's good, because if you remember, the whole purpose of the health savings account is to encourage people to really manage their account. Because you put in that $1,000, that's what they work with up to a certain point. And again, after expenses, we believe Teladoc will save us about $100,000. None of that is good news, it's just reality. What we'd like to ask you to do this evening, while we're certainly a long way from adopting the budget, we need feedback and, if possible, a consensus vote that tells us, do you support this? Because if you do, we need to go ahead immediately and contact Blue Cross Blue Shield and begin to work with the employees to let them know, here are the changes. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions. I would like to ask Gail Maids and Kimberly to come up. They may be able to help some of the questions. So ladies, if y'all would join me a minute, please. Kimberly? Okay, you're coming. Okay.
Couple of questions I have, Richard. On the 10% increase for employee premiums, what is that in dollar and cents?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the introduction for that. I forgot I had these last slides. When you look at the impact on the city, here is your impact, $319,000, and you can see the impact by each of the funds. So for the general fund, it is $200,000, or you might as well say that it is 2/3 of a penny of tax. Because we get about, what, Gail, $350,000 from a penny? So roughly 2/3 of a penny will go to the health fund. You can see water and sewer. Obviously, this is a direct reflection on the number of people who are covered by each of the programs. Now, the grant programs, those are people who may be in the general fund, but are funded by a grant. That's the reason why they're shown there rather than in one of the other funds. Let me see if I have any other slides. Oh, no other slides. Okay.
Total, it's about $130,000, a 10% increase.
For the employees.
Yeah.
For a typical employee, how much does that mean to that employee as far as their deduction?
Well,
It depends on which plan you're in, and it also depends on whether you're just covering your spouse or your children or your whole family.
Right.
I will tell you, for the least, where you're just covering, okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
the lowest employee-only contribution right now is $20 a pay period. The highest employee-only contribution is $40 a pay period. The lowest or the highest, a family The lowest family contribution is 160 a pay period. The highest is 320 a pay period.
Yeah, let me give you some, and I appreciate those numbers, Ron. In the $2,750 deductible, we have 70 employees who are covering their families. That's $160 a pay. So that will go up to $176. Is that right? Okay. Just wanted to make sure. So, you know, it'll go up from 160 to 176. But remember, you have to multiply that $16 times 26 paychecks. If you look at the $1,750 deductible, there are only 10 families in that. That's currently $230 per pay, so it will go up $23. So it will go up to $253. What I will do, and I apologize for not having that on the slide, I would like to take a moment to just pass this around. And if you will notice, here are your 4 plans. The little numbers out here on the left-hand side will show you how many participants are in each. So if you would, Ron, you have one, if you could pass that the other way.
So in the proposed budget, you had contributions decreasing. I don't understand why, did we expect that? Were we expecting to have
Yeah, I
fewer
was gonna
people?
ask the same questions, because it's
I mean,
down 7%.
I mean, I don't understand why was this
The
projected
proposed
unless-
18 budget is different from what you're saying.
Well, remember, every time we have turnover, we have people who move in and out of the plan.
Okay.
What we are finding is a lot of the folks are moving to not having coverage with us, or they are moving from family coverage to a single person. So the premiums float depending on what the makeup of the employee's personal life is. So for example, again, and let's use the chart that you have. If you're currently in the 2,750 plan, and you're a family coverage, and that person leaves employment of the city, and he's replaced with a person who's just a single police officer, those premiums change around.
We also had 40 people who went into the HSA account, which is a much lower premium for the employee, so we're collecting less money.
Okay.
But overall, your proposed budget and your fund balance through these changes is the 387 that you're anticipating of putting it back in.
That's right. What he's saying is the number here does not include that premium increase. Is that
It
correct?
does not include the premium
Right.
increase.
On any kind of city or
That's correct.
Now, with the deductibles, with the current plan that we have, looking at the $1,250 deductible, basically with this insurance plan, a family would have to pay out-of-pocket expense $1,250 before the insurance kick in?
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
correct? If that's the case, then I would say that my only concern would be for this population of individuals. If we eliminate the $1,250 deductible and move those families to the $1,750, then that's an extra $500 that they will have to pay out of pocket. And my only concern would be if we move to this plan, because $500 for one group might be easy breezy, where someone else, it might create a financial hardship. So I would say that if council moved to this, if there is any way possible, we can stall it for a year to give this particular group of individuals time to figure out their finances, so if they have to move to the 1750, it's not such a critical blow. You have a year to think about it as opposed to a few months, or the option of moving to a SHA. I just would not feel comfortable putting these individuals into an economic hardship when they have not financially had enough time to prepare for it.
Well, also, I remind you, though, that $500 is actually offset. If you're going to pass on the premium increases, which we definitely recommend you do. If a person stays, may I borrow that slip just a second?
Yeah,
If
it
a
goes
person,
320 for a family at the 750 to 230. So that's a $90 a pay period decrease in contribution, plus you have to add the 10% back in. So they're gonna save about,
Because it's a different plan, it's cheaper.
yes. So they're gonna have more or less taken out of their pay, each pay
Okay.
period. That would help offset that $500.
That's the way it's moving across the country.
And if I
is-
can add, Councilwoman Washington, that was a great question. I think it might be misinterpreted. You do not have to meet that out-of-pocket before the insurance kicks in. I think that was your question, and that's not accurate. That insurance is active immediately. You never exceed your out-of-pocket. As a matter of fact, most of our employees never reach the out-of-pocket amount.
Okay.
So if they went to the doctor, they'd pay a $35 copay. The rest is covered by the insurance. So it does kick in immediately. They do not have to reach that out-of-pocket first before the insurance kicked in. I think that was your
Okay.
question.
I think
It's
that
the-
really comes into play with a major medical though.
Right.
If something, happens and they've got to be hospitalized for 3 weeks, then they'll meet that 1250 right away.
They'll
They'll have to
immediately meet that,
right.
right. And then that insurance, that's their maximum that they'll ever reach out of pocket, then it would kick in at 100%.
Okay, that
And
was
let's
gonna be my
remember,
next question.
and let's remember the preventative care, colonoscopies, mammograms, annual physicals, all that's covered at 100%. So it's not as if they're not going to be able to get that care.
So you say most people, which I understand that most people don't meet their deductible.
No, they meet their deductible. They don't necessarily reach the out-of-pocket, particularly for a family. They would not
Well,
reach
what's the
their
difference?
out-of-pocket max.
Okay, if they're not hitting it, how is eliminating going to help us?
How is eliminating?
well, first of all, none of us are health experts. What I can tell you is, working with our consultant, what he has said is, you need to eliminate one of these plans. I will also, in what they call full disclosure, he recommended forcing people from the highest deductible into the lower deductible. And we said, we just can't do that, because if you're taking people who are currently in the 2750 plan and making them go to the 1750, their premiums every month are going to shoot through the roof. Now, one of the ways to hold down your premium increase is to do that. But, because you're getting more premiums for less percent. But at the end of the day, 5 times 2 is still 10, and 2 times 5 is still 11, or something like that, right? It doesn't really matter what you do, you have to look at the bottom line of the money. And that's why we were opposed, as a staff, we were opposed to the consultant's recommendation of eliminating the largest deductible. Because while forcing people to go to the 1250 or 1750 plan will give us a whole lot more premiums, it breaks the back of employees. Because once again, if I may borrow the sheet, just looking across the bottom line, there are 70 families in the 2750 plan. There are 10 in the 1750 plan, and only 4 in the 1250 plan. So,
You're not really moving anybody.
no, I
I'm not
mean,
moving the needle much at all with those kind of numbers.
That's right.
no, but the point that we're making is, we've got to move some needles.
It's just a category that
Okay.
needs to go away, period.
Okay. So actually, our plan is an 80-20 plan where the insurance is paying 80% and the employee is paying 20%. So it's a matter really of numbers. Would you rather pay up front as opposed to paying on the back end? Or do you pay on the back end as opposed to paying up front? And my money would be, if I'm at a 2750, if I'm paying up front when I need my insurance, it's going to cover that's the HSA, they cover at 90%. Whereas the employee only has to pick up 10%.
Once the insurance kick in, under an HSA, they pay for all the initial medical treatment
It's a
up to,
90-10 plan. The insurance
No.
pick up 90%.
not until
Once it
after.
kicks in,
Yeah,
yes.
the first
Yeah,
2,000,
but that would be your goal. I would rather pay up front than to pay it at the end.
So the HSA is a completely different product
Yeah.
than the other three plans. And that one is exactly what I said the other three weren't, which is you have to pay before it even kicks in. The other three
Gotcha.
are your basic 80/20 plans. That one is completely different. And the industry is all moving that way because they can through a calculation I don't quite understand,
matter of how you
show
wanna pay
you
it.
that HSA
About the
plans
revenue.
actually, they do modeling to show it actually saves an organization money to go to HSA plans. There are some organizations that are strictly going straight to HSA plans. So the purpose of eliminating, honestly, the plan that we're talking about or recommending that we eliminate is that it will, in many cases, do exactly what you're saying, ma'am, which is get people to recognize that they can, because it's kind of managing your own health care account, move to an HSA and could save them money. They get that $1,000 up front. They manage how it's spent. They're showing significant savings to companies by moving in that direction. We feel, I believe, that we want to make sure that we offer our employees options, because going straight to HSAs is kind of a very harsh decision. So we thought, let's eliminate, and it's been our strategy to eliminate our highest plan for some time now. And I think this is the perfect opportunity to do that.
Well, looking at the total bottom line of everything, and this might be a dumb question, but the $4 million out of that, over a quarter of that spent on administrative costs, is that typical?
From everything we can determine it is, because remember, what they're doing is they're managing all the claims.
And that also includes the stop loss insurance. It includes the stop loss insurance premium. It's all that rolled into that administrative fee.
This includes your consulting fees and
Yes.
everything?
Yes.
I think it's, if you don't mind me speaking up, it's important to note that the group that meets on this monthly looks at the states, the North Carolina League of Municipalities, our peer cohorts, industries across the state, and compares what those industries and what we're doing to see if we're comparative, if we're, charging too much, too little, is our out-of-pocket too much, is our copay too much, is our emergency rate too much, and we look at what the industry is doing and what we're doing to make sure we're in line. So comparatively, I think we're doing very well. Everybody is increasing their medical costs. As you know, 5% is simply inflation.
There's no good news here, Mr. Willingham.
I just want to make sure I understand everything, because to say that you're getting your medical services before you meet the deductible, I don't think that's accurate. Office copay, general office copay, yeah. Certain examinations, yeah. Probably not MRIs. I paid over $800 for MRIs and not been over. So there are a lot of things that you're not getting the benefit from because you haven't met your deductible, okay? And I'm concerned about that. I know that's not one of the options, but $2,700 seems like a lot to me for a deductible. So just for a point of interest, and I'm not really arguing any of the options, I just would like to know how many people in the 2,700 plan deductible aren't getting any of those benefits that would redound to them by meeting the deductible. Because it's almost like, I know you got catastrophic coverage, but it's almost like you got coverage in name only if you're paying out of pocket for all these things. And I'm just curious.
We can get that information for you. I think you're gonna find it's most of them. I think you're gonna find that what that $2,750 plan really is catastrophic coverage. I can tell you, Gwen and I have been on this plan now for 6 years. We have never met our deductible, and we're glad of that. That means that we're healthy.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
You make the good point, and of course that's one of the things about the HSA that is beneficial to so many people is they have that $1,000 to manage from day one. Now, I'm not selling HSAs because I'm not on it. But I think we'll get the data for you, but I think you're going to find that in each of these categories, we won't look just at the 2750 category, But let's go ahead and get the data on the other three categories to say,
Okay.
out of all of the participants in a particular year, and I'll be quite frank with you, my forecast is 80% or more in any of these categories didn't meet their deductible. What we also
A lot of
found
times,
is that 11% of our claims, and you remember an email that I sent out to you and to the employees, I don't think I brought it down here, but 11% of our claims result in over 80% of our expenses.
Pretty typical.
And we'll get that information
thank
for
you, but one kind of general concern is that people are so intimidated by a deductible that they don't get the treatment they deserve, because they're trying to avoid paying out of pocket.
Well, that's one of the things that, and I agree with that. One of the things that we found about use of the emergency room was the fact you can go to the emergency room and walk out without paying any money. Why? We'll bill you. On the other hand, if you go to any of the urgent care, you got to pay that copay right there.
Right.
And we've talked to employees and not knowing why, well, not knowing that they actually use the emergency room, but we've had employees tell us, I use the emergency room because towards the end of the month, when my money is tight and I don't have it, I get a bill. That's why we're really pushing the teledoc,
That's a wonderful,
because
wonderful.
that way, there's no copay, there is no additional bill. I mean, and I'll give you once again, in January, Gwen got sick. Well, guess who got sick 2 weeks later? Okay, a family dog. Okay. The total bill to the city of Jacksonville for both of us using teledoc in January was $5.80. The total bill. The total cost to Richard and Gwen Woodruff was $0. If either one of us or both of us had gone to the urgent care, it would have cost us $70 out of our own pocket and would have cost the city's health plan, pick a number, $250. But for $5.80, we got it covered. This is where we have got to incentivize our employees to go. And you saw the hands.
Are all the out-of-pocket maximums about the same on each one of those plans?
That's a question I need to
You're talking about the copay. So for example, if you go into primary care,
No, I'm talking about the out-of-pocket maximum for the year.
well,
This one right here.
yeah. I'm gonna let you answer that question.
The out-of-pocket max for the plan that we're considering eliminating,
Give the out of box for each one.
out-of-pocket, would be for single, $3,250, and for family, $9,750. The next plan would be single, $4,500, family, $12,700. The next plan, $6,350, single, $12,700, family.
That's the maximum.
And then the
out-of-pocket.
HSA, which is handled a little different.
Dr. Woodruff,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. With this insurance plan, is it a HMO, a health maintenance organization, which means I have to choose a physician, a pharmacy, and a hospital, and a laboratory company within the network? Or is it a PPO that gives me the right to pick, choose, and refuse?
Well, it's actually, I'm gonna answer it differently than Kimberly, and probably different than you ask it. It's neither, because you can pick anybody you want to give your service, but they gotta be in the network. So for example,
Okay.
let's say, for example, that a person has a heart specialist. If there are 5 heart specialists in the network, they can go to any of them. The system doesn't pick it. But if you want a heart specialist that's outside that network,
You have to pick up the
you have to pick up the difference. So it's not a PPO or a,
That is the right term.
It is a PPO.
It
It
is
is not an HMO. It
Okay.
is a PPO.
but again, as Mr. Thomas mentioned, that's part of why you pay Blue Cross the administrative fee, is they negotiate with who is going to be in the system and what those rates are going to be.
So what do we need
Because
to do?
like
tonight?
Jerome's MRI would have probably been $1,700 if he walked in off the street with no insurance at all. So they negotiated these reduced rates.
No, he would get it free.
So you're looking for direction as to,
Either,
this is gonna
either tonight
forward.
or a week from tonight, we need some answers as to what do you want to do with the health plan?
or is the council prepared to act on that tonight, or do you want to wait for further information?
I'm prepared to act.
I just have a
I think we discussed that as a health team. And, you know, one of the things I said was, look, let's make it $500. The problem is, some people are abusing it, but some people actually need it. And unfortunately, if a person falls and has a major injury and they're going to the ER, that's one thing. If a person has the flu and is going, that's a different thing. I don't think that you're gonna see, personally, I don't think that you're gonna see any change in behavior going $200, $300. We were just trying to soften the blow to the people that are legitimate users of the ER.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, that even if it's 300 or 500 or 600, they can still go and get treatment. They don't pay up front. That's still billed, and they don't have to give them a penny and still get service. And then they could either pay the 3 when they get the bill or whatever it is. So you're not really eliminating.
At least you're eliminating those hundreds of dollars.
But what I'm saying is it doesn't incentivize someone to go to maybe urgent care or use Teladoc regardless of the amount, because they're still gonna get the service if they go to the emergency room. Maybe some will think about it, but essentially,
maybe we
you
need
don't need the $300.
Financial education to
to
say
go
that
to the
if you go
emergency
for
room.
$70 today or $200 next month, I'm sorry, I mean, the smart choice is $70 today. But I know what you're saying.
You know, I think you ought to leave the emergency room for emergencies. And in that case, you're talking about something serious that I won't say it's catastrophic, but it's certainly much more serious. And I think just $300, I think, is just, you're still not gonna get people to quit going because they've got a cold or a flu. I think $500 makes, I think they start thinking about it a little bit, as long as they're educated or as long as they're aware. I may be wrong, but.
Definitely have to educate them.
How about if we do this? If you'll agree at $300, just so we can begin to move forward, we will also ask the consultant to run the numbers on what they think the savings would be at $400 and at $500.
All right.
And we will get back with you to show you those numbers. If the numbers, and I don't think this is going to be the case, but if at $300 you're saving $35,000, but at $500 you're saving $40,000, I don't know if you accomplished any. If you went to a significant number, but we will get that information. They can run the models and tell us that at each of these levels, this is what their projected savings would be.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move we accept the staff's recommendations.
Second.
Are you clear on what those recommendations are?
With the qualification of the emergency room.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. And you're gonna run those numbers, the 3, 4, and 5?
Yes, sir.
Get them, do that.
One last thing, is there any way that possible you could tie the Teladoc and the emergency room, where you could condition something like that, where, say, call the Teladoc first, and then if he says go, you know what I'm saying? Just to tie those two together to provide some kind of incentive.
I'll ask the question. I don't know the answer. I think I know the answer, and that is, I'm not sure you can tell anybody what they can and can't do. But,
Well, I mean, you can incentivize it.
well, it's a pretty good incentive, $300 or $500 versus $5.80.
Maybe you could make it up. You could make a no deductible, say if the Teladoc told you to go, you got no deductible.
I see what you're saying. That if the Teladoc says you need to get the emergency immediately. Gotcha. Okay.
When you figure that one out, you'll be a billionaire, because then the rest of the country compete. Well, everybody's different, I mean, For so long, we have civilians didn't have to have health insurance, and people decided not to have
Any
it.
visit to the.
Whereas with military, it's an automatic given. You automatically had it.
We
So you never
appreciate-
had to think about it.
I apologize.
The city would, well, the city.
Dr. Woodruff.
We appreciate that. What we would like to do is take a few minutes, up until 6 o'clock, if you don't mind, going through some of the other department budgets. We would like to take a break and then go into closed session at 6:15. As we begin with recreation, that's page 93 of your, 93, 94, 95 of your budget book. As we begin this, I'd like to call on Mr. Carter, who's our recreation expert, with some great news. So, John?
Thank you, Dr. Woodruff. The county attorney called me this morning and said, John, we've received over here documentation from the United States Department of Interior, the National Park Service, and the state, where, and I'll just read one line, the National Park Service says, we have reviewed and approved the state's request on behalf of the county and the city for the entire conversion of the 1.16 acres to the, I think it's 5.3 acres, 5.13 acres, to move the money, the obligation from this side of the river to the other side of the river. The only thing that is needed to make that become accomplished is a couple of housekeeping things. One of them is a restrictive covenant on the Jacksonville landing site, where it clearly shows for anyone who does a title search that there is this restriction on it. Won't give the amount or whatever, but we say before you buy this property, before you do anything further, you need to contact us, because we do have we have given money, et cetera, and so forth. I've already done a draft of that and sent it to the state. They're reviewing it, and anyway, we have it. The conversion's been approved. Again, it's just a matter of getting that recorded, and we'll have accomplished that, which took how long, sir?
Over a year. I would like to publicly commend Greg Mishaw for the leadership he gave in helping us put together all the documents, Pat Donovan Potts for all the work she did, Lily Gray for all the work that she did, and certainly Mr. Carter. While this was a joint city-county effort, I will say those four people did the heavy lifting, and they are to be commended. In a future workshop, certainly not during this fiscal year, but probably late summer, we'll need to come back and visit with y'all on what do you want to do with that property in the future. But it is now freed up. It is released from any restrictions other than what you, as an elected body, will want to do with that property.
So it'd be a joint workshop though, right?
It would,
Because the
I would
county and-
prefer a joint workshop, because the county owns half the property and you own half the property. And of course, we do have the Downtown Revitalization Committee made up of city and county folks who need to also be studying what their recommendations are there. Okay. Very quickly, if you look at page 94, 95, as you see on the screen, the proposed budget is up about $900,000. Why is that? Well, it's capital improvement projects. You will notice on the bottom of page 95 that you have $500,000 going into Northeast Creek for recreation improvements on the playground side. You have $82,000 going into tennis court rehab, both at the Commons and at Kerr Street. And you have Northeast Creek bulkhead and boardwalk, $324,000. That's part of your CIP. Overall, when you move that out, there are really very little changes to the total bottom line. There are some things, if you will look at page 96 in your budget, there are some personnel things that I want to make sure that we are talking with you about. If you'll notice, full-time employees went from 44 to 45. There's an error in part-time employees, 3 and 3. One of the recommendations that's built into the budget, you will recall we were asking for the part-time person who has been running the splash pad and doing a lot of other things to become a full-time person. So the actual number of full-time is 45. The part-time employee should be 2, not 3. The other note that I would have there is the seasonal part-time employees. That's 6 employees that we talked to you about when we had the temporary employment agency discussion. And what we're saying is that those 6 people would be seasonal, part-time. They would be hired by the HR department, not through the temp agency. And as such, the transfer is going to be offset, not quite totally, but almost totally, by the funds from temp, from the temp account. So the temp account will go down, and the employees are there. Now, you're not voting on that tonight, we're just explaining. And I did notice in preparation for tonight that one of the things you asked us for was a comparison for the last 2 or 3 years, employees in every department. I realize that has not gotten to you. We will get that to you for the next meeting. Other than that, in the rate, which is not before you, you will also notice a $10 rate increase proposed for the before and after school. That will help offset the increase in some of these salaries, because these salaries are directly related to the before and after school program. Not all of them, but most of them. Any questions you have on recreation? Okay. Under development services, we'll move, I think, through this pretty quickly. The real change in development services, you will notice that planning admin went up. The number one reason is that Lily is no longer in CD. Looking at what the budget for the federal level is projected to be, and looking at the work that she does overall, her salary has been split by general fund and community development. We made the decision to move that into the general fund line item. Let's talk a second about that department. When Reggie retired, you know that my philosophy is you don't just automatically fill a vacancy unless it's someone like a police officer, a firefighter, a sanitation person. If it's a management person, you analyze it. And what I'm saying to you is that we're currently analyzing that, and we will be sending you information regarding how we're going to be reorganizing that department. So when you look at planning admin, the real change there has to do with a transfer of a person. Any questions on planning admin? Building inspections.
What page are you on, Dr. Woodruff?
That's page 102 now for building inspections. If you look at building inspections, you can see that the proposed is down 634,000 versus 718. But the 718 was actually basically technology and equipment. So the real is, if you look across there, it's generally where it was before. What you will notice is in the revenues on page 102, that there is a substantial change in revenues. And in just a minute, I'm going to look at a budget topic with you to show you some information on that. Overall, this budget changed primarily because of IT and media. Their IT services are not nearly what they were being charged before. So this is a much fairer rate. And there's 6 employees, as you'll see in a minute. Code enforcement, really, whoops, I apologize. Code enforcement, you'll notice that there's, minor change, but again, that's because of Lily's salary that was split between 3 departments. But code enforcement is flat other than that one item. Community development, that's on page 110 and 111. We have no idea what the federal government is going to do with CDBG. We do not have, usually by this time every year, we have a letter that tells us what the revenue is going to be for the coming year. We do not have that. The continuing resolution that was passed by the Congress does fund this through September 30th. That's all we know. What we are assuming is that it will be funded next year, meaning from October 1 through September 30th. what we believe is the case is that CD money will be there through all of fiscal year 18 for the city and will totally disappear in your next fiscal budget. That's what we believe is going to happen. So, again, we've restructured that department many, many times to try to prepare for the constant decline in numbers.
What is this with expenditures, insurance contracts, and fleet? Just,
On line item 2, actually, I don't know that I can, I don't think I can answer that, but I will get you an answer. Well, I'm sorry. You're talking about the amended budget versus the adopted budget. Let me find that answer for you. Okay. Office of Livable Neighborhoods, you will notice that it has gone up substantially, but the reason why it's gone up is that the $50,000 was transferred relative to the money that the general fund is available for public-private partnerships. That was managed under non-departmental. When we created the Office of Livable Neighborhoods, this was given to Lilly to manage that, so that was put in their budget. Other than that 50,000, the rest of it are incidental media costs and IT costs. There are two department issues which we will look at later, but generally this budget is flat. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do is spend a minute talking about building inspections. The building department enforces the state building code. It's not a city building code, it's a state building code. It's the same building code that every municipality and county in the state enforces. Now, they do have the right to make certain changes. Generally, we have not made changes. What do? They conduct inspections and they approve constructions. There's 6 people. We have 6 inspectors that have different categories, level 1 through level 3. We have very competent inspectors. Most of them are in the level 3 in every category. So you can be a level 3 plumber, level 3 electrician, level 3, framing, whatever the other categories are, HVAC. Not everybody has level 3s. Most of them have level 3s in every category. Here's the dilemma that we face, and that's revenue versus expenditures. When the city was growing great guns, you had a budget expenditure of $800,000, but you were pulling in $1.2 million in fees. Today, that's not what we see. You can see that the revenue in 16 was not equal to the expenditure. The projection for the end of this year is dismal. 435,000 versus 700,000 of expenditure. It's a little better next year because the expenditures are down. But what you can see is the revenues don't keep pace with the expenditures. What that means is the general fund's picking up the difference. That's not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a fact. Permits have stayed relatively the same. The difference is a permit is a permit, but it doesn't mean that it's for the same, one could be for a single family home this year, and next year it could be for a shed. If you look at the last 2 years of what we've been permitting, there are no multiple family. And I will tell you, I don't believe that you'll see, unless it's a waterfront development or something coming out of HUD or a senior complex, you're not going to see another multiple family complex built in Jacksonville for many years. Now, if the military suddenly turns around and builds back up, may happen. But these are actual numbers. In 16, we had 28 single-family homes permitted. So far this year, we've had 15. Commercial upfits, and I kind of lumped some things in there that are not necessarily upfits, but some other things, you can see generally trending the same. Electrical, plumbing, mechanical, looks pretty solid. What this tells you is what? We're being carried right now by commercial growth. Rooftops always are first, commercial growth always. What we hope is that that trend continues. Here's some recommendations. You've seen the first one, but here are the two recommendations I'd give you here. With the new county commission and the new county management, I have discussed with the county manager whether they would like to continue to look at merging these departments. What David has told me is that he has not gotten a read from the county commission yet on this. They obviously have only been there for a few months. We'd like to continue that effort to see if they're interested. Equally, or maybe more importantly, we need to establish an ad hoc committee, which I would like to be the one who selects it, to study growth and development standards. What are we actually saying? What I'm being told by a number of developers is that growth's occurring in this county. It's just not occurring inside the city. We need to find out why. Now, if it's occurring down at Sneed's Ferry, okay. But if it's occurring out on Piney Green, outside the city, when it could be inside the city, that means we got some problems. What I want to do through the ad hoc committee is put together the actual people who are in the building industry. You know, people like Atlantic Construction, people like Tootin, people like John Pierce, people like Beecham, whoever. People who actually build, and ask them, are you building in the city or not, and why not? If they come back to us and say, well, the reason why is because no one wants to pay city taxes, that tells us something. If they come back and say, your development standards are more expensive because you require cul-de-sacs of this, or road standards of that, or your facility fees are too high, or. We have to know that answer. Otherwise, this pattern right here isn't going to change. Okay. Anybody have any problem with me moving forward with an ad hoc committee to bring you back some recommendations in the next 90 days?
I think that's a good idea, myself.
Okay.
Everybody all right with that?
Yes.
Yes.
If you don't mind, let's take a quick break and we'll reconvene at 6:15 with your closed session. And then if possible, we would like to stay a little after that to continue some of the department reviews.
6:17, 6:18, is that what you got in mind?
Thank you.
You're live.
All right, we're going back into our workshop session, and we'll go ahead and go to the next topic.
Mayor, members of the council, at this point, I think we actually, we should be. Let me find the right slide. We're under Public Services Administration Division, not Internal Services.
Oh, that's 117?
That's gonna be page 117. Okay. Under Public Services, this is really your Public Works area, engineering, street, sanitation, and so forth. The administrative part is broken into two budgets. One for those activities that are for the general fund, and then, of course, their larger activities are for utilities. What you'll notice is that in the Public Works Administration budget, which is page 117, 18, and 19, there is a small decrease that is primarily due to issues having to do with, the reallocation. If you notice in Public Works Administration, there is a nominal decrease, but what I'd ask you to do is look at the overall numbers from actual 17, the amended 17, the actual 16 versus the proposed budget. Let's discuss those for just a second. In the admin part, what you have is, of course, people who are split. Wally and some of the other people are split because they spend most of their time doing water and sewer, sanitation, those type things, not just in one particular focus. But the overall budget there has gone down from the amended from 1.9 to just a little under 1.9. The real changes were in, once again, fleet charges, IT. For all practical purposes, the budget is the same. If you look at engineering, which is page 123, the one point that we would make there is that, again, engineering looks at the amount of time that they're going to spend in capital improvement projects in the general fund CIP and in the water and sewer CIP. You can see that in the general fund, we're going to have some capital improvement projects, but not anything like the amount of time that they're going to spend on the water and sewer. And these numbers fluctuate depending on the amount of water and sewer or capital projects that you're doing any particular year. One interesting note is that the bridge over 24, the bicycle bridge over 24, there is no money in here to paint that bicycle bridge. Okay? I don't know how many times you get asked that question every year, but I'm telling you, at least 2 or 3 times a year, somebody phones me and says, "You guys need to paint that bicycle bridge." Well, it's, Mr. Bittner made the call years ago, we're not ever going to paint it. But guess what? We do have to inspect it. The DOT used to cover that cost, but in this year's budget, we did add $7,000 for a professional to come in and do a structural integrity test. Obviously, we want that done. The main purpose or the main effort for engineering, though, is going to be over in the water and sewer fund. And I would draw your attention there to the engineering, and I want you to notice the increase from actual 16 to amended and back to proposed. You remember the water tank contract that we have where we have them inspected and they're refurbished, but we have to keep $1 million in a reserve. So what you're going to see is if you adopt this budget at 1.5 million for engineering, after the beginning of the fiscal year, you'll have a budget amendment that will add $1 million to it. So really, it's for lack of a better term, and Gail doesn't like me to say this, it's a money game based upon contracts that we have which require us to keep that $1 million in reserve so that if for any reason that contract was ever voided, the money would be there to finish paying it out. Let me see if there are any other. We also, in this budget, we've added $40,000 for personnel to be hired through contracts to actually oversee some of our projects. So, we need to have on-site inspectors, and that cost will be charged to the projects. So as we get into some of the major projects, such as the Parkwood project, you will have a full-time inspector who will be in there, but that person will not be a city employee. That person will be a contract employee. You remember, we used that approach when we refurbished this building. We hired a person, and we did the same thing on the Center for Public Safety. We did the same thing on Fire Station 2. So overall, there are really very little changes in public utilities, admin, or in the general engineering area. Wally, you have any?
No, sir.
Adams, any questions in those two areas? Under facility maintenance, I have to tell you, they're not only some of the best-looking guys I've ever worked with, but they get things done. One of the things that you authorized us to do this past year was to add a specialty, and that has to do with air conditioning. And we now were able to find a person who was out in the private sector working for a company that we actually hired to do our work. And by hiring that person to be an air conditioning specialist, we've now been able to notify the contractor that we will no longer be using their services except in cases that are beyond our needs. So you've given us the ability to expand what Alan Baker and their people do. You'll notice their budget, it went down a little bit. Why is that? We talked earlier about the issues on health insurance. This budget primarily fluctuated because employee turnover resulted in different levels of employee coverage. And in this case, some people who didn't really want city coverage. I will also say to you, if you have not been by the waterfront down at Kerr Street at Riverwalk Park, you need to go by there, because the employees that are under Alan Baker and under Johnny Stiltner, they have dismantled that marina. They have saved over $50,000 of what we would have had to pay a contractor. That just shows you what you get from your city employees. And these two gentlemen, their employees are to be commended. Now, I will tell you, Joe and Pete believe that they're responsible for all the water that's in the river, and Pat tries to keep all their water clean, but I do publicly commend both of those departments for their work down there. Facility maintenance really had no other changes other than those minor things having to do with coverage for health insurance. City Hall maintenance, almost no change at all. That's the only reason why we have that broken out from facility maintenance, is that at one point, someone decided that they'd like to be able to track the expenses of City Hall. All the other expenses are covered under facility maintenance. And Alan, you have what, 120-something buildings you cover? Give or take. Give or take how many, 30 or 40? Okay. Any questions there, though, at all? Street department. Now, streets is Powell bill and non-Powell bill. I was not present, but I understand Wally did an outstanding job talking to you about the 311 work order system. And that's going to help us significantly in documenting when the crew works for Powell bill, when they work for non-Powell bill. You will notice that that the budgets fluctuate, but overall, it's a function of who is working how many hours in which one. So you almost have to look at these as roll-up numbers where you combine the two. You can't really look at Powell bill and say, what are the changes there, or non-Powell bill and what are the changes. What happens is, the more they work on Powell bill projects, the more their salary gets paid there. The more they work on non-Powell bill projects, the more they work there. And then also remember, Johnny's crews are storm drain, so his people are paid by the stormwater fee. So this is a budget where the same employee can be doing different things on different days and paid out of different pots. And that's one of the reasons why that 311 or 311 work order system is just so very, very essential. We do have in the Powell bill the $100,000 for sidewalk and $830,000 this year for street rehab, for paving. I would also point out that if you will recall on the traffic system, in the Powell bill, you were making payments. In FY18, the city will make a second payment to the NCDOT on the $2.2 million that we owe. In fiscal year 17, a payment was executed in the amount of $1.1 million. In fiscal year 18 and 19, we will basically make equal payments, and then that $500,000+ will be free to go back to other activities of paving and sidewalk improvements. But that's really your Powell bill and non-Powell bill accounts. One of the things that we would point out in the non-Powell bill, we discussed when we were talking about temporary agencies, we do have 3 employees that we would like to move from hiring through the temp to hiring through HR. That will be a offset with money, so it's not an issue of increasing the fee one way or the other. It's just taking it out of one line item and charging it to the other. Because as we said to you before, there was almost no turnover in those 3 positions. So why should we pay the premium to the temporary agency for that? You have any more on those? Any questions on Powell or non-Powell?
Do you want to point out the stormwater?
I'm sorry?
Did you want to point out about the stormwater fee?
Sure, go ahead.
The only other thing I would note from streets non-POW bill, that's where the city pays our portion of the stormwater fee for all of the city-maintained roads.
And that is budgeted this year at $579,660. So obviously, you know, not quite 2 cents of your tax money goes to pay our own fees for stormwater. So, under stormwater drainage, you know, the only real change there is the Center Street project. You do have some other changes on equipment and so forth, but you'll notice the almost $700,000 increase. $573,000 of that is for the capital project that you're doing on Center Street. That's next to the ABC warehouse.
How do you explain the stormwater revenue from 17 to 18 going up 28%?
What's allocated from, you know, we allocate stormwater revenue to both clean water and to drainage. So in other words, depending on where the need is.
Oh, there's a decrease somewhere else, you're saying?
I'm saying that there's two users of the stormwater revenue. Right, Gail?
That's right, and the revenue doesn't really change that.
I would think it would, yeah.
In total.
Okay.
So what we're saying is we're spending less in stormwater quality this year and more in street drainage. And that's, well, I guess it's mainly because of the project.
Well, and it could
That's
be
where
less
we're-
going into the fund balance.
Yeah, you will see when we get over to water quality, which is just a few pages away, you'll see those changes. What page is that?
That is on page 170 and 171.
Okay. We'll come to that then in just a minute. Water and sewer non-departmental. Again, almost no change in that area. If you look on page 146, you will notice that normally we budget $205,000. That's your contingency fund for water and sewer. You know, we have a contingency fund for the general fund that's in non-departmental general fund. So we also put in a contingency fund in the water and sewer. When it says $55,000 amended, What that means is that we actually spent 150 out of that contingency fund for water and sewer this year. So that's why, once you take it out, you have to assign it to a new line item. I almost talk like I know what I'm saying. Gail told me that's what we do. So, but that's the reason why the 55 number is there. And again, we will spend some of that because Pete always runs into unexpected pipes that break or valves that need to be replaced. So,
I wanted to make sure I understand too on this note number 1, about the Piney Green on Wassa availability charge. It's biannual.
It is, yes, two
Twice
times a year.
Twice a year.
Yes, sir.
We pay $227,491
That's correct.
to the base.
No, that is
Go on
paid
Wassa.
to Onwassa.
Paid to Onwassa for,
I
So
think
help-
that was,
Help them in the debt service on the line that they ran to the
Oh,
base
okay.
plant.
oh, I see.
And what happens is, as we put more flow in, that figure goes down. In other words, it's like a reservation fee. And then as our flow increases, where we're actually using it, the rate covers part of that reservation fee.
so you're not paying
That's the way
twice.
the agreement.
But you're saying it was designed to offset, I think they spent 10 million from the 24 to the place. Is there a provision that, once that's paid down, if we still don't have any customers out there, are we gonna still be paying? You know what I'm getting at? There's a
Go
finite
back and
fee.
look at the
I can
agreement.
check the agreement.
you're asking, does it
Written
ever
in
go
the
away?
Does it ever go away?
We'll
Right,
find out.
because,
I don't think it does.
Well, it does if it's part of its debt service.
well, it's positioned as an
I thought it
availability
was a fee.
fee.
Well, there's both. I think it's both an availability and debt
Yeah.
service, isn't it?
Well,
We will
okay,
actually,
yeah.
Need to
I'll
check it
the
out.
contract.
we'll pull the contract and get that answer. But again, it's not obviously just free money to Onwassa. It's to cover the fact that they had to go into debt to
Make the
get the
connection.
sewer the rest of the way down, and that's our portion of it. So but we'll get you the details.
Okay.
Get you the details. One thing that we will, while we are talking about that and Onwassa, obviously 2 members sit on the Onwassa board. We are working and have set up meetings with the new executive director of Onwassa to really talk about how we can get into wholesaling water from them, buying water at a bulk rate. You'll recall that's something that we discussed many years ago. At that time, the executive director and the Onwassa board was not favorable. We believe that the climate is positive, and we're going to begin those discussions actually this coming Friday morning. So we will let you know how that goes. Why that's important for us is this. If they have systems that we can buy bulk from, that means we don't have to put out capital outlay to get water into the same area. Now, we should look at the same thing from a sewer standpoint. We are, if I may use the term, we are water and sewer rich. They are only water rich. So I think that there's the ability here to negotiate bulk rates and bulk capacity where we're getting that from water from Onwassa, and they may be getting sewer from us. But obviously, that will be negotiated over the next several months and be brought back to y'all for direction.
Time is certainly ripe to do that with how we've helped Onwassa with the leachate problem. They're saving a lot of money because of our willingness to divert that leachate back to the land application site.
Utility maintenance. If you know anything about Pete Deaver, it's the fact he does not sleep. The fact that he has a long bed pickup truck is for a good reason. This is where every water and sewer line are repaired, where they're flushed on a weekly basis, sometimes almost 2 or 3 times a week, because of grease buildup in it. But this is what utility lines are all about. The real increase in this, if you will notice, it goes from, 5.8 million up to 14.9. The bulk of that are capital projects. There's $7.8 million in capital projects. Almost every rest of the lines that are in there are stable lines. But it just comes down to, you have an old system, you got to repair it, or if you're going to have a growing community, you've got to expand it. So that's why the increase significantly there.
I gotta say one thing, when there is a heavy rainstorm, I can count on an email from Pete as to how it's affecting the land application site.
I think as part of your conversation with Onwasa, I think we need to also explore additional diversion of sewer to their system on base. If
Yes.
there are any opportunities to relieve our system.
We agree. I mean, the ability to use the capacity that's at the base and owned by the military is important, because they're not using, I don't know the exact number, Ron, would you say they're using 30% of their capacity out there right now at the base?
Probably something like that.
Yeah.
Definitely less than 50%.
It's in the agreement right now.
But it's limited. It's
It's
capped
limited,
at 2.5 million, if my
Well,
memory is correct.
2.5, and we're not flowing,
Pardon me?
how much on Piney Green?
Well, we're not flowing much.
Well, I think,
Got
you
a
know,
lot
it'd
of
be
capacity.
good opportunity to have some updated discussions on that, because if we could relieve the pressure off of our system, particularly during all this rain that we normally have, that I think that would be a positive step.
Well, let me just,
Not only for us, but for them to get the flows.
well, let me give you just one quick example, then we'll go back to the budget. If we could send Bryn Mawr and that area there,
Right.
let's say 1 million gallons to the base, and that frees up 1 million gallons at the LTS. Well, we all know where the majority of the Onwasa sewer growth is. It's out on the southwest side of town. So that's why y'all's concept of having wholesale arrangements for water and sewer is so valid, because then we could offer wholesale capacity. We could take that 1 million gallons we're sending to the base and sell it to Onwasa so that they don't have to build larger sewer plants. But that's a discussion that we appreciate y'all giving leadership on. The primary decrease in the utility lines was the fact that we bought a very large piece of equipment last year for $387,000, and that's not a recurring purchase, at least not every year. Water supply, Joe and his folks do a great job on water supply. Increases to insurance and contracts, but overall, the main, it has stayed generally the same. We do have 3 major capital projects this year. One, continue well and well house upgrades, water plant chemical tank replacement for almost $250,000, and then Jacksonville Commons water line extensions for about $50,000. But again, that budget is pretty flat. Wastewater. If you look on page 158, timber sales, as you know, we try to harvest timber. We had budgeted $75,000. In this year, we've only harvested about $37,000. We're going to hope for better weather, and we're back on track for some controlled burning. You'll just know that we lost everything as far as any activity out there in fiscal year 16. It was just too wet. But so far this year, we have about $37,000 in timber, and we continue to try to move that forward. Under capital outlay, you'll see a significant reduction. That's one of the line items that went from $772,000 down to $134,000. And that's primarily due to which project? Blue Frog. Is that right?
I don't know.
Is that right? Pete?
They bought several pieces of equipment.
Okay.
I don't think, was it Blue Frog? I thought we did that as a capital project.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we did that as a capital. I think it's several pieces of equipment, a dump
Okay.
truck and some other things.
Okay. But the Blue Frog, as you know, has worked well. We had a meeting today to look at additional, and Pete, if you don't mind coming up for 1 second, you can tell council what the results that we're now seeing on the Blue Frog. Remember, that's where we're trying to come up with a system that results in the sludge being consumed by critters rather than having to haul the sludge off.
I may need to yield to Greg for a little bit of info, but as it stands right now, and this is strictly my personal observations, we have exceeded the performance guarantee that they gave us of 25% reduction in 12 months. We actually reached that in 9 months. Everything is looking really well. The water quality samples are staying. We've actually discovered that we're lowering the pH in the Blue Frog Lagoon, which is for the health of the trees. It's actually down into 6 is where it needs to be, and we're pretty sure we could get it down lower. With the installation of a couple of the aerators in front of the effluent pumps, we could reduce that number a little bit more for the health of the forest. But overall, it's performed way further than we expected and we anticipated. So we're on the right track. We got about June the 9th is the 12-month performance warranty for the first 12 months, and then at that time we'll sit down with Greg and figure out how we want to approach going to the state. We did have a 24-month program, but a decision will have to be made if we want to continue that 12-month program or move forward with phase 2, which is in the CIP for this year, which is to do Lagoons 1 and 3.
Greg, you want to add anything? If you do, you'll need to come up. I mean, you wore a tie tonight, so we might as well get you on TV.
Got the hot seat for you, buddy.
It does look promising. We've not, the empirical evidence is looking good, but what we're going to do is we've been generating a whole bunch of data. And so we're going to go and look at all that data hard and, ultimately confirm that it's performing like we think it's performing, and then put together a report that actually, shows you trends, puts it all down on paper so that we can say, yes, it actually performed the way it was supposed to. What I will say, though, is something interesting has happened. Blue Frog folks have made a couple of presentations to the state of North Carolina, and the state of North Carolina is impressed so much that they are putting the Blue Frog in what I think they call an innovative equipment program, where they are making this technology known to other states through the EPA, and they are putting it out there as a energy savings type of technology. And so we're real pleased about that, and we had conversations with some of the representatives today, and we think actually between the two of us, we're going to end up, again, if the data shows what we think it shows, publishing a paper together on this project.
Solid waste, Kerry? One piece of good news is that the county has decided to keep their landfill rates. At least that's the last I heard. Is that correct?
That's correct,
At
sir.
the same rate. Recycling is going to continue to be a challenge for us, and we're letting you know that we've had some meetings with the Sunoco. Now, that's not the gas company. This is a recycling company. And they're letting us know that they would like out of their current contract and that they would like to charge us more money. And I thought that was a great idea, but the city attorney pointed out that a contract was a contract. So, their real issues are glass. The market for glass has just fallen to zero, especially any glass that has any color in it. And we have set up, through Robert Voss with the DOT, we have set up some suggestions that they, at the North Carolina DOT, are following through on to see if we can create new uses for glass relative to road projects. The initial tests have shown that, that glass as a asphalt binder or in asphalt works well, except for one problem. When it gets wet, it becomes much slicker than regular asphalt. So the DOT said, we're not going to go there. On the other hand, in our discussions with them, they are now considering using glass as a bedding product for pipe. You know, it doesn't deteriorate, and they are doing some tests. So, but the bottom line from a recycling standpoint is this: 4 years from now, you can expect the recycling company to be in here, and we're going to get hammered hard with rate increases. Now, we are meeting with them to determine, okay, what are some things we can do to soften that? You know, it's almost like, you know, a professional athlete who's willing to renegotiate his contract that's going to end in 3 years by making the contract 7 years with certain changes. So we'll bring back to you information about that. But the recycling, we continue to have excellent participation in recycling. Problem is, we're recycling things that the market is no longer there for. Paper goods and cardboard have stayed strong. Aluminum has obviously stayed strong. But glass, which does produce a lot of tonnage, that's just not there.
What are their rates now?
We will give you the, what we pay them.
Okay, we don't pay them anything, sir. Okay.
There is a rate structure that if they reach a certain tonnage, they pay us back. Well, they haven't ever gotten that. But we'll give you an overview of their contract. On residential, you can see that we're actually down a little bit. That means that the general fund subsidy for sanitation will reduce a little bit this year. It actually is going from about 1.45 million down to 1.35 million, so about 100,000 less from a general fund subsidy. On commercial garbage, once again, very excellent work by Carrie. If there's anybody who is more dedicated to their job than your leadership in this department of Carrie and Johnny and Wally and Pete and Joe and Alan and anyone I'm leaving out, these people really get the job done. And what we're very pleased with is that in the commercial garbage, knock on wood, but we have found a way to get around those heavy fines that we were seeing month after month. And we won't tell you how we do that on the record, but we will tell you off the record if you'd like to have a sidebar conversation. It's just better communication between drivers. We do have a piece of equipment that we will be, it's a GMC, that will be doing a capital purchase to add one more truck. GMC stands for Gail Maid's Compactor. And we will be, that's in your budget. The value of that is, number one, we have 5 routes. You got to have 5 trucks. That's going to hold down your overtime. The other value is the fact that it helps Ed and the shop do a lot more preventative maintenance. So that's your real increase in your cost. Dumpster rentals have gone up significantly. We are buying dumpsters almost every quarter. As soon as we get them in, we're able to get them on the street and rent. So we've developed a reasonable revenue. You'll notice on page 166 that the dumpster rentals are up to $15,000. Now, that's not gonna balance the books, but we've gone from 0 to 15,000 in 2 years. And every time Carrie gets a load in, we are able to get them out. I mean, I know just yesterday we had a gentleman with a local marina who has had a contract with his dumpster with a private company. Carrie talked to him. I assume that's worked out?
Yes, sir. It's in the process of being worked out.
Okay.
But that's a good sign.
Okay, good. But again, I have to commend Kerry for the excellent leadership that he gives in this area. Kerry, anything you want to add, other than the fact we're buying the truck and your dumpsters are working well?
No, not really. I just want to also indicate that the rental part of the commercial is doing very good. We're also doing very good in the recycling part as far as placing recycling dumpsters at major department stores and restaurants in order to recycle some materials. So both those areas are on the upswing for us.
That brings up a question. I remember we were contacted by the newspaper about setting up a cardboard. Has that been set up?
No, sir. No, sir, it has not yet.
Okay, but we're working on that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions on solid waste? Water quality, stormwater, if you want to call it that. This is the stormwater fee. The revenues are split between the water quality that Pat does and the stormwater drainage that Johnny and his folks do. Overall, it's, generally a flat budget. I mean, it's gone down by $50,000, but that's basically due to the fact that we did not have as much debt service on the zero loan because we didn't borrow all of that money. You remember 4 years ago, Pat got us some very good funds, and we have not used all those funds, so the debt service just isn't there. This is an area, though, that seasonal employees, once again, Pat hires 3 people during the summer, and we've been getting them from temps, and we're going to move those to us. So there are really no real changes in that department. Any questions there? We're just hitting the high points, but there's not many other points to hit on these budgets this year. Information technology. I tell you, before we leave this one, I do need to ask you a general question. The summer employment is coming up. This budget doesn't begin until July 1st. What we're asking, though, is instead of hiring these 8 or 10 people, whatever the actual number is, the people for Pat, the people for some of these other departments, Michael, Johnny, whoever they were, that we're saying we're moving from temp agency into HR hiring. Technically, that doesn't become effective until July the 1st. Do you have any problem, though, if we go ahead and do that in-house move? I mean, what we're really saying is this: you have authorized, when you approve your budget, you have authorized positions. Technically, to take Pat's 3 people from temp, technically we're supposed to have an ordinance amendment showing those 3 people now as part-time employees. What I'd like to do is get that to you immediately for the 9th of May, so that we can have you, if you're comfortable, endorse that, so we can get those people hired through us rather than
Switching dollars from one
just
pocket to
switching
the other.
dollars from one to
It's
the
fine
other.
with me.
Okay. Chris?
We did that.
We did
Did
that.
that already. That's
Okay,
fine.
good. Thank you, I'd forgotten that.
It's enough.
Let me interrupt you just a moment.
Yes, sir.
This student you told me about.
She's here.
Oh, she is?
Yes.
Yep, she is.
There's a student who'd like her picture taken with the mayor, so, but I tell you, if you don't mind, we just have one other, and then we're gonna quit for the evening and come back on the 9th. Media services. That's page 177. You will notice that overall, it's gone from 656 to 729. Now, why did it go up? This budget reflects reassignment of costs associated with the Jacksonville Connect. That's our emergency call-out system. Also, music licenses and web hosting. These items were in the IT budget. They're now in the media budget. So it's just, once again, transferring dollars. no other real issues with that budget at all.
We got an email within the past couple of weeks talking about what we paid for so many.
The internet access,
Uh-huh,
broadband.
right. I didn't get the time period. Was that a annual charge, a
Yes.
monthly charge?
Yes.
It was annual for those figures, okay.
Basically, where we are at this point, next time around, we need to begin to talk about some of the departmental issues and try to close out the budget with the hope that we can either adopt it on the 16th or the 23rd. Of course, you could adopt it in June if you want to, but there are several loose ends. We want to bring back to you all the personnel comparisons that you had asked for. That's pretty much where we are.
Are we going to go over the fee schedule?
Yes, the fee schedule we will do at the next meeting. What you'll find is there are changes to it, but there are insignificant changes. But we will do that at the next meeting too.
Anybody have anything else?
Move we adjourn.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Opposed?